On an icy night in Greenland, a drone flies over a frozen landscape. But in such cold temperatures, its battery will likely only last a few minutes, rendering it useless. As the Arctic region increasingly comes into the geopolitical spotlight, governments are scrambling to find solutions. And the industry is working at pace to develop the technology to endure such glacial conditions. Using drones in the world's far north is problematic. Only the largest, long-range models have enough power for the anti-icing systems planes use. Cold, fog, rain, or snow can cause a malfunction or a crash in smaller models.
Icing on a drone reduces the performance. It can reduce the endurance, but it can also lead to crashes.
This is where aerospace aerodynamics engineer Joachim Wallisch comes in. In a wind tunnel in Finland, he's testing ways to help these vulnerable drones operate in freezing temperatures.
So we hope to learn how to best design an ice protection system for a wing so that it can work on multiple different designs, that it uses as little energy as possible to remove the ice completely from the wing.
Many of the cheaper models can be bought on the open market, but the Ukraine conflict has revealed their limitations in winter. Large, long-range drones that operate like airplanes can cost more than $200 million each. So, governments and large aerospace firms are turning to startups and small companies for innovative solutions, a NATO source told Reuters. So, why here in particular? Well, the Arctic is a vast region where radar and satellite coverage are limited. Countries in the far north have been reporting more acts of sabotage on energy and communications lines. Russia and China have stepped up military activity in the area, and the United States sees the region as crucial for territorial defense and its early warning system against nuclear attacks. A Reuters survey of 14 companies and 6 defense ministries and armed forces in Northern Europe and America revealed a focus on procuring drones. Russia took an early lead in the race. Its military began building up a drone fleet in the Arctic in 2014 and has only advanced since then. Drone expert James Patton Rogers acts as a policy advisor to NATO and the UN.
When it comes down to the more advanced medium-altitude, long-endurance systems, due to the fact that anything that flies up that high has to sustain extreme weather conditions, then it is the West, it is the European powers and the United States that has that advantage. And that is quite clear. But due to Russian innovations with the war in Ukraine, I'd say that when it comes down to the smaller systems at the tactical level, it is likely the case that Russia has the advantage there.
Nations with territory in the region are boosting military spending and drawing up plans to buy winter-proof drones, budgeting tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. New NATO member Finland has been a first mover, using unmanned aerial vehicles to patrol its border with Russia and protect the alliance's northeastern flank. Norway says it will invest in long-range surveillance drones for a planned Arctic base, and Sweden has said it plans to scale up capabilities in the area without giving details.
Drones are currently being used to have a persistent overwatch above key areas of strategic interest for European allied and Arctic Western powers. These are unarmed drones, let's be very clear, that can not only survey over towards the Arctic and that ever-increasing importance of the northern sea route, which is being utilized by both Russia and China for global trade in and out of the Arctic regions, but they're also strategically placing them so that these drones can also keep a watchful eye to Russia more towards Europe, more towards the Baltic and out towards Ukraine.
As military activity steps up in the Arctic, drones will become increasingly relied upon for surveillance. But until they can easily withstand the harsh conditions, the race to develop and fund new technology will remain crucial.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday ordered the expansion of a migrant detention facility at Guantanamo Bay.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them. because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. This will double our capacity immediately, right? And that's a tough place to get out of.
The U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, already houses a migrant facility separate from the high-security U.S. prison for foreign terrorism suspects. It has been used on occasion for decades, including to hold Haitians and Cubans picked up at sea. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel called Trump's plan, quote, an act of brutality. New U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan said later on Wednesday that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency would run the expanded facility. He told reporters the center would be used for the, quote, worst of the worst. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said the administration was working with Congress to determine the cost of the project. The detention facility at Guantanamo Bay was set up by George W. Bush to detain foreign militant suspects following the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States. There are 15 detainees left in the prison. Trump's two Democratic predecessors, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, both sought, albeit unsuccessfully, to shut Guantanamo down. However, Trump has vowed to keep it open. Pro-refugee groups have called for the Guantanamo migrant facility to be closed and for Congress to investigate alleged abuses there.
Questions are swirling after the deadly midair collision of an American Airlines passenger jet and a U.S. Army helicopter near a Washington, D.C. airport. Here's what we know about what happened. The collision occurred Wednesday night as the passenger jet was approaching Reagan-Washington National Airport. Here's audio of air traffic control clearing the aircraft to land.
Yeah, we can do 33 for Blue 6342.
Radio communications showed the helicopter crew knew the plane was in the vicinity.
Did you see that? 472.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said both the helicopter and the airplane had been flying standard flight patterns, and there had been no breakdown in communication.
Everything was standard in the lead up to the crash.
The Army helicopter involved a fairly experienced crew of 3 soldiers who were operating with night vision goggles on a training flight, according to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission.
But he said the helicopter crew may have made a deadly mistake.
A mistake was made. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DoD and Army level.
Military helicopters are a common sight around the U.S. Capital Region that is home to numerous military bases. There have been several near-miss incidents at Reagan National Airport that have sparked alarm, including 2 last year. The close calls coincide with a shortage of air traffic controllers that has delayed flights and raised safety concerns across the United States. The FAA in October opened an audit into runway incursion risks at the 45 busiest U.S. airports.
The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. And I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DoD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top-tier aviation assets inside the DoD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable.
Was President Donald Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to the January 6 defendants?
Thank you, Ranking Member. A couple of things on that. One, the power of the presidential pardon is just that, the president.
Well, I concede he has the authority. I'm asking, was he wrong to do it?
And as we discussed in our private meeting, Senator, I have always rejected any violence against law enforcement, and I have, including in that group, specifically addressed any violence against law enforcement on January 6th, and I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
Former U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, President Donald Trump's choice to be the Director of National Intelligence, faced harsh criticism of her past defense of former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden and comments seen as supportive of Russia at a confirmation hearing on Thursday. While in the House of Representatives, Gabbard introduced legislation that would have dropped charges against Snowden, a former government contractor who leaked thousands of National Security Agency documents and then fled to Russia. Senators on the panel, both Republicans and Democrats, pressed her to address if she believed he was a traitor. Here's Republican Senator James Lankford.
So was Edward Snowden a traitor?
Senator, my heart is with my commitment to our Constitution and our nation's security.
Ours too. Was he a traitor at the time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
Here's Democratic Senator Michael Bennet.
So let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden-like leak.
Media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation.
Gabbard is a former Democrat and combat veteran without deep intelligence experience. If confirmed, she would serve as the nation's top spy, overseeing all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. She has expressed views seen as echoing Russia's justification of its war against Ukraine, criticized U.S. involvement in Syria, and had a 2017 meeting with Moscow-backed former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. She tried to get in front of this in her opening statement.
Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States. Accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed.
Democratic Senator Mark Warner expressed his disapproval of some of Gabbard's comments and his opposition to her nomination.
You blame NATO for Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. You rejected the conclusion that Assad used chemical weapons in Syria.
Republican Senator Tom Cotton, the committee's chairman, told Fox News he backed Gabbard's nomination. Her hearing continued Thursday afternoon in a closed session to address classified information.
Multiple deaths have been reported after a passenger jet and U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided mid-air and crashed into the Potomac River Wednesday night near Reagan-Washington National Airport. Police said several agencies were involved in a search and rescue operation in the river. The airport said late on Wednesday that all takeoffs and landings had been halted as emergency personnel responded. The Federal Aviation Authority said PSA Airlines was operating a regional flight for American Airlines, which had departed from Wichita, Kansas. American Airlines said 60 passengers and 4 crew were on the plane. A U.S. official said 3 soldiers were aboard the helicopter. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas said on social media that, quote, "We know there are fatalities," though he did not say how many. NBC reported that 4 people had been recovered from the river, while the Washington Post said multiple bodies had been pulled from the water. The National Transportation Safety Board said it was gathering more information on the incident.
First and most importantly, I'd like to express our deep sorrow about these events. This is a difficult day for all of us at American Airlines, and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, partners, first responders, along with their families and loved ones. We're cooperating fully with the National Transportation Safety Board in its investigation and will continue to provide all the information we can. Our cooperation is without pause, and we want to learn everything we can about today's events. We understand and appreciate that people are eager for information. Please know that we'll continue to share accurate and timely information as soon as we can. But anything we must report must be accurate. We owe that to everyone involved.
All we can confirm tonight is the number of people on each aircraft, 64 people on the American Airlines plane and 3 people on the military helicopter. And we can't provide any more information about recovery efforts. The focus now is rescuing people, and that's what all of our personnel are focused on.
It's an active operation that's going to last many hours as we continue to work through recovery efforts and rescue operations. This will be ongoing for quite a while. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and our communities, and we appreciate all DC's support to our agency and our federal partners.
Multiple deaths have been reported after a passenger jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided mid-air and crashed into the Potomac River Wednesday night near Reagan Washington National Airport. Police said several agencies were involved in a search and rescue operation in the river. The airport said late on Wednesday that all takeoffs and landings had been halted as emergency personnel responded. The Federal Aviation Authority said PSA Airlines was operating a regional flight for American Airlines, which had departed from Wichita, Kansas. American Airlines said 60 passengers and 4 crew were on the plane. A U.S. official said 3 soldiers were aboard the helicopter. There were no confirmed reports of survivors, and CBS News said at least 18 bodies had been pulled from the water. Officials said they were still in rescue mode. Reuters White House reporter Trevor Honeycutt was at the airport.
As I'm here, I'm seeing relatives trickle in little by little through the night with no answers about what has happened to their relatives. They are just looking for information, and for the most part, they are not finding it here at the area where they are all being staged with other friends and family members who are looking for their loved ones.
In a post on social media, U.S. President Donald Trump asked why the crash wasn't averted. He called it a, quote, bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented. New Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the Pentagon was launching an immediate inquiry into the circumstances of the crash.
I was getting ready to go to bed, laying down when I hear the bang bang, a very unusual sound, something you don't hear on a daily basis. It's more like on a war zone, something you hear on movies, action. So that caught my attention. I looked up the sky, I looked up the window, and all I could see at that moment was just smokes from the south side of Reagan Airport. Horrendous. Unbelievable. Shocking. Just to think about a plane crash in the DC area, a very busy area in terms of aviation. We have 3 major airports in this area: DCA, Dallas Airport, Baltimore Airport. They're all within 40 minutes drive of each other. So that gives you a sense of how busy the radars, the air controller, and there is no room for error.
We're now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter. The district office of the medical examiner has lead on reuniting these bodies and these people with their loved ones, and we will continue to work to find all the bodies and collect them and reunite them with their loved ones. We should also acknowledge that the Virginia medical examiner and the Army medical examiner are involved in this operation and a very important part of getting people identified.
More than 60 people were feared dead on Thursday after an American Airlines jet collided with a U.S. Army helicopter over Washington, D.C.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
District of Columbia Fire and Rescue Chief John Donnelly said the regional jetliner coming from Wichita, Kansas, fell into the freezing waters of the Potomac River near Reagan Washington National Airport. American Airlines confirmed 60 passengers and 4 crew members were aboard the jet. A U.S. official said the Black Hawk military helicopter was carrying 3 soldiers on a training flight.
Did you see that? 472.
Air traffic control audio recorded an aircraft calling in, apparently referring to the crash just before 9 p.m. Wednesday night. Surveillance footage appears to show a sudden fireball over the sky. The mid-air collision occurred as the passenger jet was approaching to land at Reagan.
We can do 33 for Blue 6342.
Radio communications between the air traffic control tower and the Black Hawk showed the helicopter knew the plane was in the vicinity.
This was not unusual with military aircraft flying the river and aircraft landing at DCA.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said both the helicopter and the airplane had been flying standard flight patterns, and there had been no breakdown in communication.
What I've seen so far, do I think this was preventable? Absolutely.
Airspace is frequently crowded in the U.S. capital region, home to 3 commercial airports and several major military facilities. Passengers on the flight included ice skaters, family, and coaches returning from events in Wichita, including Russian-born former world champions Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov. Russian media said Shishkova and Naumov, who were married and working as coaches, were returning from Wichita with a group of young skaters. The Kremlin offered condolences to the families of Russians killed.
We have been told that there are no survivors. We mourn with all those who have been impacted. This is a terrible tragedy that will unite those in Washington, D.C. and Wichita, Kansas forever. Our hearts are heavy. Our hearts are heavy as a city. Our hearts are heavy as a city council. And we are here to provide the support needed for our community and all who have been affected.
President Paul Kagame said that Rwanda was ready to, quote, deal with any possible confrontation with South Africa should it arise over the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The long-simmering conflict in Congo has intensified over the last week, with M23 rebels capturing the strategic city of Goma. Congo, South Africa and others accuse Rwanda of backing M23. Kagame has rejected criticism over his country's role in the conflict. During a virtual summit of East African leaders, Kagame accused South African President Cyril Ramaphosa of distorting recent conversations about the conflict.
He's also there pretending to be playing a peacemaker role, and he has a force that has been fighting alongside FDLR and has been fighting the M23 on the instructions of Tshisekedi, because these are people who are not supposed to be in Congo, that these are from Rwanda, or the M23 are not Rwandans, please.
Congo President Felix Tshisekedi did not attend the virtual summit. Instead, he gave a speech to the nation in which he promised a military campaign to recover lost territory. Rwanda is facing an international backlash over its actions in eastern Congo. It has repeatedly intervened there, either directly or through allied militias, over the past 30 years in the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide. The United States has told Rwanda it is deeply troubled by Goma's fall. Germany has cancelled aid talks with Rwanda, while Britain said the $40 million of annual bilateral assistance it gives to Kigali were under threat. After seizing Goma, M23 fighters were advancing south from the town of Minova along the western side of Lake Kivu. Goma itself is a lakeside city of nearly 2 million and a major hub for displaced people and aid groups. M23 says it plans to administer the city and appears to be settling in for a lengthy period of control. Scores of Congolese asylum seekers who fled to Rwanda during recent fighting are returning home, following assurances of safety from the rebel group.
Democratic Republic of Congo President Felix Tshisekedi vowed on Wednesday to mount a response to reclaim territory seized by M23 rebels who captured the eastern city of Goma earlier this week. In a televised address, Tshisekedi accused Rwanda of backing the M23 insurgency, which he described as a, quote, terrorist enterprise. The president said he had convened emergency meetings with government and military officials to assess the situation and plan countermeasures. Earlier on Wednesday, nearly 300 foreign mercenaries hired by the Democratic Republic of Congo government had surrendered to the rebel group. They were hired to bolster Congo's underpaid and disorganised army, but with limited coordination made the conflict worse, according to a group which maps unrest in eastern Congo. After being cornered alongside remnants of Congo's army and its allied militias, they handed themselves over to United Nations peacekeeping troops for transit home through Rwanda. Before crossing the border, one mercenary was scolded by an M23 spokesperson in front of journalists. Rwanda, which diplomats say backs M23 fighters, called on Wednesday for a ceasefire across eastern Congo and for Congo to negotiate with the rebels while denying Rwandan troops were involved. Rwanda's foreign minister told Reuters fighting will halt in Goma itself because it is now controlled by the rebels. People in Goma said looting and sporadic gunfire continued on Wednesday. Congo considers M23 a terrorist group and refuses to negotiate directly with it. M23 rebels were reportedly moving south from Goma in what appeared to be an attempt to expand their area of control. This video from social media shows armed fighters moving south along the reported route of advance of the M23 rebel group. It was not immediately clear which side the men belonged to. The rebels' rapid advances through Congo's mineral-rich east since the start of the year followed a breakdown in peace talks between Congo and Rwanda in mid-December.
Nous sommes dans le Congo, mais nous sommes déjà assujettis par les rebelles des M23.
We're in Congo, but already we are under the control of the M23 rebels. And now it feels like we are in a dual nation. We are in Congo and at the same time in Rwanda. But we are wondering, what will be the outcome of this situation? Because our soldiers are no longer here, yet we are already invaded by M23 militants. This is the reality in this city.
Syria's de facto leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, was declared president for a transitional phase on Wednesday, allowing him to further tighten his hold on power 2 months after he led a campaign that toppled Bashar al-Assad. The decisions emerged after a meeting of military commanders who took part in the offensive against Assad, a campaign which was spearheaded by Sharaa's Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group, a former al-Qaeda affiliate. According to an announcement by military command, Sharaa was empowered to form a temporary legislative council and suspend the Syrian constitution. At the meeting, Sharaa laid out his priorities.
Fill the void of power in a legal and lawful way. Second, sustain civil peace through the pursuit of justice and prevent manifestations of retaliation.
He also vowed to rebuild state institutions, including the military and police. And he promised action on the economy, agriculture, and industry. Sharaa has pledged to embark on a political transition, including a national conference, an inclusive government, and eventual elections, which he said could take up to 4 years to hold. The parliament elected under Assad last year was formally dissolved. No timeline was given for the transition period or for when a new legislative body might be picked. Qatar, which backs the new administration, issued a statement welcoming the announcements. One Syria expert told Reuters the declaration had formalized Sharar's status as a strongman ruler and could be intended to consolidate single-party Islamist rule.
So these are a network of tunnels that were built in the 1940s and then expanded in the 1950s. Basically, the deep level shelter to protect British citizens against the bombing of what we know as the London Blitz. So there were 43,000 people that died during that time, so it's a memorial, a story for those people. But given the vast space we've got here, they're over a mile long, we can certainly reactivate the deepest licensed bar, which would be the deepest licensed bar in a city, and we can open up as an arts and culture section. So it's a very large space for up to 3 million people a year.
Former U.S. Senator Bob Menendez was sentenced to 11 years in prison on Wednesday over his 2024 conviction on bribery and corruption charges. Menendez spoke to reporters outside the courthouse after receiving his sentence.
I am innocent, and I look forward to filing appeals on a whole host of issues. But let me just say this. This whole process has been nothing but a political witch hunt. I hope President Trump cleans up the cesspool and restores the integrity to the system.
Prosecutors with the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office said the 71-year-old steered millions of dollars in aid to Egypt and interfered in local prosecutions of allied businessmen in exchange for bribes, including gold bars, cash, and a Mercedes-Benz. Menendez, a once powerful Democrat who spent 18 and a half years representing New Jersey in the Senate, was found guilty in July on all 16 felony counts he faced. He was also found guilty of acting as a foreign agent, a first for a U.S. senator. He resigned from the Senate in August. In a tearful address to the court before being sentenced Wednesday, Menendez said he was chastened by the verdict and asked that his decades as a federal and local elected official weigh in favor of leniency. The judge also sentenced 2 New Jersey businessmen who were convicted in the Menendez trial. Fred Davies received 7 years in prison, while Walhana got just over 8 years. The judge ordered Menendez to begin his prison term on June 6th, allowing him to attend his wife Nadine Menendez's corruption trial starting in March.
Chaotic scenes as Hamas handed over Israeli hostage Arbel Yahoud to the Red Cross on Thursday, fearful and apparently struggling to walk as crowds surged around her. Israel delayed the release of 110 Palestinian prisoners under the Gaza ceasefire deal in an angry response, but went ahead after mediators committed to ensuring the safe passage of hostages in future releases, the Prime Minister's office said. An Israeli hostage abducted by Hamas from the same kibbutz as Yahoud, 80-year-old Gadi Moses, was also released, along with 5 Thai nationals who'd been working on Israeli farms when armed militants burst through the border fence on October 7, 2023. And Israeli soldier Agam Berger, who was first led between ruined buildings and over piles of rubble in Jabalia in northern Gaza. Thursday's releases saw another show of force for Hamas, a reminder that it still has a strong presence in Gaza after more than 15 months of heavy bombardment from the Middle East's most advanced military. Yahoud was handed over on the site of the bombed house of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who was killed by Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened death to anyone hurting hostages and urged mediators to ensure the jostling crowd scenes wouldn't be repeated. Later on Thursday, buses arrived in the West Bank city of Ramallah carrying some of the Palestinian prisoners, expected to be freed as part of the phased agreement. Palestinian health officials said at least 14 Palestinians were hurt by Israeli fire, some with live and rubber bullets, others from gas inhalation, as they gathered at the entrance to Ramallah in the Israeli-occupied West Bank to welcome the freed detainees. There was no immediate comment from Israel. In Israel, it was a day of celebration in what has become known as Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, where people were watching on giant screens. Some cheered when US Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff joined them, in apparent gratitude for his role in securing the ceasefire deal. More than 250 hostages were abducted in the Hamas attack in Israel, and more than 1,200 people were killed, according to Israeli tallies. Israel's assault has killed more than 47,000 Palestinians in Gaza and laid waste to the enclave, where people face severe shortages of medicine, fuel and food.
יהיה טוב, יהיה טוב, יהיה טוב, לא מעניין אותם. אנחנו פה ולא עוזבים אותך לעולם, לנצח. הבטחה של אימא, הבטחה של אימא. טוב.
What's up?